Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate the invitation to speak because we are living at a time of great transition. It's a shift to a digital economy. There's amazing innovation that is taking place. And of course, all this is happening during a major COVID pandemic. So that is complicating everybody's lives. I think everybody all around the world is trying to figure out how to renegotiate the social contract. There's a lot of uncertainty over how to handle these things. So my book, The Future of Work, Robots, AI, and Automation, addresses many of these issues. In it, I argue that the technology revolution is accelerating. I think people are going to be shocked how quickly certain changes take place. We suggest in the book that AI is one of the transformative technologies of our time. It's being deployed in many different sectors, from healthcare and education to retail and national defense. And just to give a few examples of how some of the new technologies are being used, in the United States, we now have automated retail stores without any cashiers. Basically, the way they operate, people download the app for the company, they walk in through turnstiles, they purchase the items that they want, and then they walk out, and the items are automatically charged either to your credit card or to a mobile payment system. But you do not deal with any human cashier. And these retail stores are becoming more prevalent around the country. In the healthcare area, we're seeing the use of remote monitoring devices to record health conditions. These devices can record your vital signs, your blood sugar levels, your heart rate, breathing issues, and automatically transmit them to healthcare providers. And the goal through these devices is to become more proactive about healthcare as opposed to reactive. We want to be able to anticipate problems and deal with them before they become acute. And then the last example I'll give is just we're starting to see the emergence of autonomous vehicles. There are a number of car companies out there that are pilot testing autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars. The goal is to basically have them on the roads in major cities within the next few years. So we're seeing technology start to emerge in a lot of different sectors. It's being applied in a lot of different ways. And all of these developments are creating both opportunities and risks. On the opportunity side, the new technologies creates the possibility that people may actually have to work less. They can work fewer hours, but be more productive in the process. We also could be in a situation where machines do the boring or dangerous tasks, and that is helpful to humans in the sense that it frees us from some of the worst kinds of jobs. It would free humans to pursue hobbies and outside interests. They may have interest in art, music, theater, or sports, and they would have time to do those things. It could lead to a better work-life balance where people are working less and have more time to pursue the interests that they have. But at the same time that we have these various opportunities, there also are several risks. The big risk, of course, is that humans get left behind. We know, even independently of technology, there has been a rise of inequality in many countries around the world. This is creating the risk that some people are not doing well while others are doing very well. That type of inequality increases social unrest and political turmoil. So it certainly raises a lot of problems for a number of different countries. Technology also can increase geographical disparities. There could be a mismatch between where the population lives and where the economic output is taking place. In the United States, some of my metro colleagues at the Brookings Institution did an analysis, and they found that about 15% of American counties generated 70% of our gross domestic product. And what that means in practice is that a lot of the American economic activity is taking place on the West Coast, on the East Coast, and then a few metropolitan areas in between. But many parts of the country are being left behind. They're not doing well. There aren't very many jobs. There's not much of an economic future. And it, of course, leads the people living in those areas to feel like they're being left behind and they're not sharing in the prosperity. Here in the United States, 3/4 of our venture capital money is going to just 3 states, like California, New York, and Massachusetts. So there's a risk that technology may actually make inequality even worse in the future than it is today. And so that creates a lot of problems. And so here in the United States, there's a lot of discussion about how Trumpism may not be an aberration and that Trumpism may actually outlast Trump himself. And by that, we mean that the economic and social anxiety associated with these broader economic trends, the geographic trends, the increases in inequality, and the rise of technology innovation, that those fears and that anxiety could actually increase in coming decades. And the problem when there is great inequality is people look for scapegoats. They want to know who to blame for their difficult economic circumstances, who to blame for the anxiety they're feeling, who is responsible for the bad circumstances in which they are living. These fears could be real or imagined, but they become a big part of the political landscape. And so leaders have to deal with them. And of course, all of this is taking place during the time of a major pandemic. And one of the ironies is COVID has actually accelerated technology innovation. I mean, we have probably shifted what might have been 5 years of technological change into 5 months. We're seeing a shift to online learning, to telemedicine, doctors relying on video conferencing as opposed to in-person appearances. Many more people are engaging in e-commerce. They're buying their products online as opposed to physically going to a store. And then a number of companies have moved to remote work, where people are working from home as opposed to going to the company headquarters. And so when you add all these changes together, COVID is actually increasing the rate and the intensity of technology innovation. And so all the changes that we've been talking about actually could become more acute in the future. It's not likely we're going to go back to the old order because these changes are likely to persist into the future. Given the rise of technology innovation, the impact of COVID, and the increases in inequality, we argue that what we need right now is a new social contract with one another. And let me just lay out a few ingredients of this social contract, just to talk about what we need. One is we argue that it's going to increase the need for lifelong learning. Kind of the old model of education is people invest in education up through about age 25, and then after that, they get a job and they're kind of on their own. Because technology is going to remove some jobs, but create other higher level jobs, people are going to have to upgrade their job skills throughout their life. They cannot just stop their formal education at age 25, but they will need to upgrade their job skills at age 30, 40, 50, and 60. So that means online learning is going to need to be a part of people's lives, taking certificate programs, taking classes that can give people concrete skills. Those are specific things that people are going to need. A second thing that countries need to think about is how healthcare and retirement benefits are going to be provided. So in the United States, many of our health and retirement benefits are tied to the job. And sometimes when people shift from one job to another job, it creates problems in terms of maintaining the continuity of their health benefits. They may end up in a different healthcare network, need to see a different doctor than the one they were seeing before. And so for countries where the benefits are tied to the job, there could be an increase in what we call job churn. meaning people moving from company to company, and that's going to create problems in terms of how healthcare is delivered. So countries need to be thinking about that. We also need to figure out how to address income inequality. We need a new social contract that involves changes in tax policy, in social benefits, in how education is funded as well. We need to figure out ways to promote middle-class prosperity and greater equity in terms of the provision of social benefits. So there are a lot of public policy changes that we think flow from the technology changes and the COVID-induced changes that we've seen in recent years. Now, the good news is this is not the first time the world has dealt with mega change, kind of large-scale changes that are transforming the economy. 100 years ago in the United States, we shifted from an agrarian to an industrial economy. And when you kind of go back to the period from the 1890s through the 1930s, there were major changes that took place as the country moved towards industrialization, factories, production lines, and so on. There was a lot of social upheaval associated with those changes. It took decades to deal with them, but we made a number of policy changes that helped the country deal with that in terms of helping workers get a better education, providing unemployment insurance for those who were temporarily unemployed, developing Social Security, old age programs to help older individuals have the income that they needed. We broke up some of the monopolies of the time associated with railroad and oil companies. We adopted new taxes. We developed an income tax. There also were political reforms that took place in terms of expanding the right to vote, creating new mechanisms that gave voters more direct control over the political process and addressed issues of corruption that existed within the United States. So today, I argue that we're at a similar point where we're making a transition to a digital economy. And we're seeing the same type of reaction of a lot of disruption, chaos, considerable uncertainty, just lots of changes taking place. And so what we need to do is to think big in terms of our policy agenda and the issue of political reform. So we need to come up with ideas that will address the problems that we already see and think about what are the changes in social policy that would make a difference. And we also need to give advice to young people about how to navigate these changes in the landscape. What we're going to see is an increase in job mobility in which people are going to end up having more jobs and more different types of jobs at different points in their life. And I like to give the example that in my adulthood, I've actually only had 2 jobs. I worked at a university, Brown University, and then now I work in DC at a research think tank, Brookings. When I talk to young people, I tell them that is not likely to be their kind of life. They are likely to have 6, 7, or 8 different jobs. They'll work for different companies. They may have to cut across different sectors. There's just going to be more instability in those situations. The large tech companies today have large market capitalizations, but they don't have very many employees because they're internet platforms that can scale up, serve many customers without really adding a lot of workers. And I always like to talk about an insight from Charles Darwin, the famous student of evolution, in which he noted that survival goes not to the strongest or the most intelligent, but the most adaptable. And I've always thought that that insight was actually important for this transition to the digital economy. Because as we're moving into this technology-based world, the key personal qualities are going to be adaptability, persistence, and resilience. These are personal skills that individuals and countries are going to have in order to do well. Because there's going to be so much change in a relatively short period of time, people are going to have to figure out how to adapt to those new circumstances, new types of jobs, new types of skills, new types of business models, new types of industrial organizations. And I think the big challenge a lot of countries are going to face will be cultural, in the sense that countries kind of vary in the extent to which they have personal versus societal attributions of responsibility. So for example, in the United States, we have a culture that is based on individualism, where people are responsible mainly for themselves. It's kind of a norm of personal responsibility. You know, if you do well, it's because you've invested in education, you're smart, you work hard, and then you reap the economic benefits. And then others who do not do well, it's kind of their own fault. You know, they haven't invested in education. They may not work hard. It's all an individualistic type of political culture. This is not a culture that is actually going to be well suited for the future. We need to move to more social attributions of responsibility, because there are going to be structural circumstances in which whether people do well or poorly is going to be a function of the society and the structure and the public policy, as opposed to how hard you work or how much you invest in your education. So societies are going to have to figure out how to help each other. They're going to have to figure out how to develop policies that are socially beneficial, and they're going to have to figure out how to pay for the education and the job skills that people are going to need. So if countries do this, we're very optimistic about the future, think that their societies will do very well. But if a country does not adopt that mentality, it's going to be very problematic. Their people are going to face a lot of problems, and it's going to be a very challenging time. Thank you very much.